And Sean, is you have Zelensky. He goes to Europe, and a lot of our European friends puff him up. They say, you know, you're a freedom fighter. You need to keep fighting forever. Well, fighting forever with what? With whose money, with whose ammunition, and with whose lives? The president is actually taking a much more realistic perspective and saying this can't go on forever. We can't fund this thing forever. The Ukrainians can't fight forever. So let's bring this thing to a peaceful settlement.
So what does the future look like for US-Ukraine relations after that epic showdown in the Oval Office on Friday? Is there a deal still on the table? As always, please support the channel by subscribing and hitting that like button. But first, on Friday, before President Zelensky went back to Europe, he appeared on an interview on Fox News with Bret Baier, where he was asked multiple times if the relationship with Trump could be salvaged, and if he was still willing to apologize. Here's what he said.
So I'm not hearing from you, Mr. President, a thought that you owe the president an apology.
No, I respect President and I respect American people. And if, I don't know, if I think that we have to be very open and very honest. And I'm not sure that we did something bad. I think maybe sometimes some things we have to discuss out of media, with all respect to democracy and to a free media. But there are things that where we have to understand the position of Ukraine and Ukrainians. And I think that is the most important thing.
Even in this interview, we see that he's still talking about the need for security and the need for European and US boots on the ground in Ukraine. This was made clear that it will be something that will be negotiated at a later time. It was a lot of the same things that he said before. He says he wants a peace deal. The Ukrainians asked to meet with Trump again that afternoon. But Trump didn't take him seriously. By that time, the damage has already been done. As we saw immediately afterwards, Lindsey Graham made a statement. He said he and other Republican senators, who have been a very big advocate for Ukraine and President Zelensky, they were very upset with him, especially since he'd been coached in the morning before the meeting. They all gave him the same advice. Just get the deal done, don't play games, and be appreciative. So what happened? Why didn't he listen? Well, 40 minutes before, he was meeting with Senate Democrats.
Democrat Senator Chris Murphy said, quote, just finished a meeting with President Zelensky here in Washington. He confirmed that the Ukrainian people will not support a fake peace agreement where Putin gets everything he wants and there are no security arrangements for Ukraine.
So although Murphy denies it, he definitely got to Zelensky's head. Less than an hour later, he's in the White House starting a fight with Trump and J.D. Vance and kills a deal. And then Murphy gets on TV and says this.
It is absolutely shameful what is happening right now. The White House has become an arm of the Kremlin. Every single day you hear from the National Security Advisor, from the President of the United States, from his entire national security team, Kremlin talking points. For the last week, the White House has been pretending as if Ukraine started this war. That's essentially saying that Poland invaded Germany at the beginning of World War II. There are still facts in this world. And the fact is this: Vladimir Putin is a brutal dictator. Russia started this war. And the entire pretext for that meeting yesterday was an attempt to rewrite history in order to sign a deal with Putin that hands Putin Ukraine.
So why sabotage a peace deal? So you can call Trump a Russian puppet? Rachel Maddow has a similar take. She thinks we've sold out to the Russians.
In fact, he actually is not trying to negotiate a deal. He's trying to nurture a relationship with Vladimir Putin. And as you said, I hope the American people understand this is wrong. It's not in our national interest. And I think Trump is way out ahead of the people, as your polling that you just described.
Yeah, I think whatever Americans voted for, I don't think people voted to make the United States a subsidiary diplomatic entity to Vladimir Putin, which is the way that
Exactly.
Trump is operating here. You mentioned the rest of Europe rallying to Zelensky. One of the things that we saw today were leaders of democracies from all over Europe publicly thanking Zelensky today, standing
Yes.
with him in solidarity after this meeting with Trump. You know, you talk about whether or not the United States is any longer associated with the free world, whether we are the leader of the free world. If we're not, is it becoming clear who is?
Well, I want to keep hope alive. President Trump and his team don't seem to want to be part of the free world.
Trump knows Putin can't be trusted, but he's just resetting the relationship to bring peace. This is what Marco Rubio said.
The security guarantees, which I actually like to call deterrence, is all contingent upon there being a peace. Everybody's saying security guarantees to secure the peace. You first have to have a peace. We don't even know if the peace is possible. And this was understood by the Ukrainians. It was explained to them repeatedly. And that is, here's our strategy. We're trying to get Putin to a negotiating table. Let's not everyone knows the history here, the back and forth. We understand that. We all understand that. But the question now is, can we get them to a table to negotiate? That's our goal. Don't do anything to disrupt that. And that's what Zelensky did, unfortunately, is he found every opportunity to try to Ukraine-splain on every issue. Then he confronts the vice president. When the vice president says, the goal here is diplomacy, he immediately jumps in and challenges the vice president. Well, what kind of diplomacy? So we all understand, okay, that Putin is not going to be an easy negotiator in this regard. We all get that. But we have to start the process to see if something is even possible.
All the Republicans are looking at this as a tragedy. They thought it was a done deal.
The tragedy of Friday, and I don't know what President Zelensky was thinking, we had President of France, Emmanuel Macron, in on Monday. Great meeting. We had Prime Minister Keir Starmer on Thursday. Fantastic meeting. They were all on board the arc of the peace agreement. All President Zelensky had to do was come in and sign this economic agreement, and again, show no daylight between Ukrainian people and the American people, and he chose to blow that up.
So the deal's no longer on the table, just to be abundantly clear.
Not at present.
Treasury Secretary Bessent, thank you for coming in today.
Good. Thank you, Margaret.
A peace deal would be good for our economy. Ending the war would bring down the cost of energy, which would in turn bring down the rate of inflation. It would have given us a new market for our minerals, which would also be really prosperous for Ukraine. Zelensky says he's still ready to sign the minerals deal. And we say the door is always open. But he's got to do one thing first.
There's quite a disconnect happening here at the White House and with their allies in Kyiv, because I have been told by a senior official here that nothing's going to happen with this minerals deal until Zelensky goes in front of cameras and makes an explicit public apology for the way that he behaved in the Oval Office with that meeting. But Zelensky is out there now saying that he thinks he can still get this minerals deal without saying sorry.
Will he do what's required? Over the weekend, we see him hanging out with European leaders. They're telling him that they've got his back and will stand with you. Listen to what UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer had to say.
We will go further to develop a coalition of the willing to defend a deal in Ukraine and to guarantee the peace. Not every nation will feel able to contribute, but that can't mean that we sit back. Instead, those willing will intensify planning now with real urgency. The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air. Together with others, Europe must do the heavy lifting. But to support peace in our continent and to succeed, this effort must have strong US backing.
Probably not the best thing you can say. That you can't do it alone without United States support. You're telling Putin that without the United States, you couldn't handle peace talks or protect Ukraine militarily? Talk about playing into Putin's hands. I mean, I think it's a good thing that European leaders are now suddenly stepping up and putting more into their defense, like Trump said to do years ago. They're finally taking the responsibility for their own defense. But then, in a meeting with the rest of the foreign leaders, Zelensky said this.
Врятувати стосунки, те, що ви сказали. Я думаю, що наші відносини будуть продовжені, тому що це більше, ніж відносини одного чи іншого моменту. До угоди про закінчення війни ще дуже-дуже далеко. Ніхто всі ці кроки не розпочав. Мир, який ми будемо передбачати в майбутньому, повинен бути справедливим, чесним, а головне, сталий мир.
This is very dangerous messaging because once again, Putin is watching this. However, it does confirm what Trump said, in the fact that Zelensky just wants to keep fighting to try to end the war the way he wants to. Everyone around him, including Democrat U.S. senators, are empowering him to do so.
I want to see it end fast. I don't want to see this go on for years and years. Now, President Zelensky supposedly made a statement today in AP. I'm not a big fan of AP, so maybe it was an incorrect statement, but he said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time. And he better not be right about that. That's all I'm saying.
Zelensky is demanding military resources from all the European allies. They're committing to putting boots on the ground in Ukraine. Everyone's all for it. They're all giving Zelensky a pat on the back and, you got this, you're a war fighter, you're a hero. It's really not the right thing to do. They should be urging Zelensky to stop the fighting, go back to the United States and sign a deal for peace. Move on, help him shift his attitude. Vice President J.D. Vance, in his first interview since the showdown on Friday, sums it up perfectly.
But the president has set a very clear goal for his administration. He wants the killing to stop. And I think that it's very important that President Zelensky and, of course, President Putin, too, they've both got to come to the negotiating table. And that's ultimately where things broke apart. I really don't care what President Zelensky says about me or anybody else, but he showed a clear unwillingness to engage in the peace process that President Trump has said is the policy of the American people and of their president. That's the real breakdown, is I think Zelensky wasn't yet there. And I think, frankly, now still isn't there, but I think he'll get there eventually. He has to. I think our European friends, frankly, are being really they're doing a disservice to the Ukrainians because their own populations are saying, we're not going to fund this war indefinitely. The American people are saying, we don't want to fund the war indefinitely. So the only thing that is in the best interest of America, of Russia, of Ukraine, and of Europe is to bring this thing to a close. What happened, Sean, is you have Zelensky. He goes to Europe, and a lot of our European friends puff him up. They say, you're a freedom fighter. You need to keep fighting forever. Well, fighting forever with what? With whose money, with whose ammunition, and with whose lives? The president is actually taking a much more realistic perspective and saying this can't go on forever. We can't fund this thing forever. The Ukrainians can't fight forever. So let's bring this thing to a peaceful settlement.
Trump has realized that if you want peace in the world, you don't spread democracy, you spread business. Because you create those business relationships with people, and then they won't invade your country. So the final question for this video. Do you think Trump is right in his methods towards getting a peace deal? Or do you think Europeans can handle this on their own without our involvement? Do you think Zelensky owes Trump an apology before going back to the White House to sign the deal? Let me know what you think in the comments section below. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. A lot of people have been saying that if you watch the full 45-minute meeting on Friday, it will give you a much better understanding of what led up to the tense moments that we all saw at the end. If you missed that video, I put together a few highlights from it, which is coming up right now.